Eastern today. And then a break for party caucus meetings. They'll return at about 2:15 Eastern to continue work on a measure to omit the confirmation process for lower-level executive nominations. And now the live Senate coverage here on C-SPAN 2.
Chaplain Dr. Barry Black will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Gracious God, whose glory has been revealed through the generations, renew within our senators a true understanding of your purpose for this nation and world. Illuminate their minds with the light of your wisdom so that they will know how to meet the complex challenges of our time. Lord, use them to lift the spirits of the American people, to encourage the hearts of those on life's margins, and to bring peace to those troubled by the problems in our world. May their trust in your word fill them with confidence in your providential leading. We pray in your sovereign name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., June 28, 2011. To the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Jean Shaheen, a senator from the state of New Hampshire, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Madam President.
The Majority Leader.
Following leader remarks, the Senate will be in executive session to consider the Cole, Monaco, and Seitz nominations. These are all for the Justice Department. The first vote today will be at noon on confirmation of James Cole to be Deputy Attorney General. We're hopeful that Monica and Seitz nominations can be confirmed by voice vote. Following that first vote, the Senate will recess until 2:15 p.m. for the weekly caucus meetings. At 2:15, the Senate will resume consideration of the Presidential Appointment Efficiency and Streamlining Act. Working on an agreement to complete action on that bill and the Rules Committee resolution, which will follow. Additional roll call votes are expected today. Madam President, H.R. 1249 is due for a second reading. I would ask the clerk to report.
The clerk will read the title of the bill for the second time.
H.R. 1249, an act to amend Title 35, United States Code, to provide for patent reform.
I would now object to any further proceedings to this bill at this time.
Objection is heard. The bill will be placed on the calendar under the provisions of Rule 14.
Madam President, yesterday I sat down with the President to talk about how to avoid a default crisis. It would be a black mark on this country's reputation for generations to come. If we fail to avert this crisis, it would be the first time in our great nation's history that we defaulted on our financial obligations, and it would send shockwaves through the global economy. But I'm not the only one saying that. The most respected voices in the business and financial community are saying the same thing. Default would be awful. Business leaders, economists, bank executives, credit rating agencies, and even Republican advisor to President Reagan and George Bush, the same advisor, have used some very serious words to describe the kind of crisis defaulting our debt would cause. The word many have used would be a catastrophe. The legendary Warren Buffett said a few days ago, allowing the United States to default on its debt would be, for Congress, the most asinine act ever. That's a quote from Warren Buffett. Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner said a failure to avert default would have a catastrophic economic consequence that would last for decades. That was a quote. Failure to avert this crisis would have dire consequences. It would result in the most serious financial crisis this country has ever faced. Millions of Americans could lose their jobs. Federal prisons would have to be changed dramatically with their personnel. Border security would have to change. Our court systems would no longer likely be able to have trials. Security checks could stop. So could paychecks to our troops. That's how desperate it would be. So what could be so important that my Republican colleagues are willing to put our economy at such dire risk? What could be worth walking away from the negotiating table, as they have done? Tax breaks for wealthy oil companies and corporate jets. Republicans have gone to the mat for big oil, fighting again and again to preserve wasteful taxpayer-funded giveaways to companies that made tens of billions of dollars in profits in the first quarter this year alone. And Republicans walked away from the negotiating table to save tax breaks for corporate jets. So which big industries and special interests will they fight for next? Oil companies that ship jobs overseas, corporate companies that ship jobs overseas, corporate jets. If they were truly serious about reducing the deficit, they would admit this kind of waste must end. Yet some top Republicans say eliminating these subsidies shouldn't even be part of the discussion as we find a way to reduce the deficit and avoid a catastrophic default. Several rank-and-file Republicans have said handouts to oil and gas companies and other wasteful tax breaks should be on the table as we negotiate. These are Republicans. And 34 Republicans endorsed the view that ending taxpayer giveaways should be part of the solution when they voted to eliminate subsidies for ethanol. It seems Republicans can't even agree among themselves whether subsidies and giveaways are sacrosanct. The one thing that they can agree on, it seems, they're willing to balance the budget on the backs of seniors instead. They're willing to end Medicare as we know it. They're willing to slash Medicaid, jeopardizing coverage for 80% of American seniors in nursing homes. Medicaid, Madam President, is for the poorest of the poor, but about 70% of Medicaid money goes to people who are in rest homes, nursing homes. Republicans' priorities then are very clear. They're dead wrong, though. Democrats know we need to make difficult spending cuts to reduce our deficit. But to dig ourselves out of this financial hole, we must also create jobs to spur our economy. And we must break the cycle of wasteful giveaways, not break our promise to seniors. The junior senator from South Carolina, a Republican, threatened that any Republican who votes to avert a default crisis will be gone. Those are his words. Voted out in a wave of Tea Party anger. This kind of inflammatory language is irresponsible. There's simply too much at stake. Also, this same senator didn't mention that 235 Republicans in the House and 40 in the Senate, including my friend from South Carolina, who I've just talked about, have already voted to increase our debt this year. Their ideological budget that came from the House that they wanted to support here and did vote for it would have increased the debt by more than 60% over the next 10 years. The so-called Ryan budget, so-called Ryan budget, would increase the debt by more than 60% over the next 10 years. That's about $9 trillion in a decade. And what did Republicans get for the so-called $9 trillion? What would we get? A plan that ends Medicare, a plan that would slash Medicaid, jeopardizing coverage, as I've indicated, for 80% of American seniors and nursing homes, a plan that protects tax breaks for billionaires and oil companies while putting millions of seniors at risk. That's the choice. The psychologist Alfred Adler once said that, quote, "It is easier to fight for one's principles than to live up to them," end of quote. Republicans shouted loudly and repeatedly about reducing the debt. Then they gave us 9 trillion reasons not to trust this rhetoric. The time for empty rhetoric is over. Now it's time for my Republican colleagues to put the good of our economy ahead of their own politics. Madam President, would you be so kind as to announce morning business? We have no morning business?
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations, which the clerk will report.
Nominations: Department of Justice, James Michael Cole of the District of Columbia to be a Deputy Attorney General. Virginia A. Seitz of the District of Columbia to be Assistant Attorney General. Lisa O. Monaco of the District of Columbia to be Assistant Attorney General.
Under the previous order, there will be 2 hours of debate concurrently on the nomination, equally divided and controlled in the usual form.
Madam President, I would
Majority
ask
Leader.
that all quorum calls during the debate on these important nominations be equally charged against both sides. And I would ask that,
Without objection.
the final 15 minutes set aside for debate on these nominations be set aside for the Chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Patrick Leahy.
Without objection.
I would note the absent quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Consent to speak as if in morning business for 5 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. President, Madam President, The last thing we need when we're trying to get back on track is a default crisis that would grind our economy to a halt and bury us under even more debt. Yet the latest round of Republican politicians threatening to default on our debt have made their priorities clear. They'd rather stop paying our men and women fighting overseas, force deep cuts to Social Security and Medicare, and throw even more Americans out of work than tell big oil companies and corporate jet owners to pay their fair share. Clearly, our Republican colleagues are serious about politics, not deficits. You can't be serious about deficits and at the same time recklessly jeopardize our economic standing in the world in order to protect tax breaks for the wealthiest few. Yet that is what leaders like Mitch McConnell seem to be saying. Just yesterday, my Republican colleague drew a line in the sand on cutting wasteful spending in the tax code, calling elimination of special interest giveaways politically impossible. Politically impossible? Really? Just 2 weeks ago, 34 Senate Republicans joined Democrats in passing the repeal of subsidies to ethanol companies. Politically impossible? The landmark budget agreements of the 1990s brought us into balance and ushered in surpluses that took a balanced approach and created prosperity and job creation like we haven't seen in this decade. Politically impossible? Right now, in America, middle-class families are living paycheck to paycheck, while Senator McConnell and his colleagues are going to the mat to protect billions in tax breaks to oil companies. They say two things. Senator McConnell says two things. He says he is not raising taxes. He wants the average American to think it's your taxes. No one wants to raise taxes on people below $250 million, many of us people below $1 million. But when oil companies get big giveaways, when corporate jets get huge deductions, a greater deduction than Delta gets when it buys a plane for commercial use, that should be on the table. We should ask Senator McConnell, the press should ask Senator McConnell, when you say no taxes, do you mean that some of our largest corporations should pay no taxes? When you say no taxes should be on the table? Are you saying we shouldn't close corporate loopholes? Are you saying people who are making $1 billion should not sacrifice and all the sacrifice should be the middle class? Because that is what Senator McConnell is saying. Again, we do not wish to tax and will not tax average middle-class people. That's the President's pledge and that's our pledge. The question is, when you tell an average teacher or cop or firefighter you have to sacrifice, are you going to tell the millionaire they have to sacrifice too? Not because we dislike them, but because it should be shared across the board. And Senator McConnell has said no. The millionaires should not sacrifice because the only way they're going to sacrifice is closing loopholes in the tax code. They don't need loans to help their kids get to college. And one other thing. Senator McConnell says we should take anything about corporate loopholes, about taxing wealthy people off the table. His my way or the highway approach is what is standing in the way of getting an agreement. The person standing in the way right now is Senator McConnell. You haven't heard such strident language from the other leaders. When he says, take everything we want and nothing you want, we will not get an agreement. That is what he is saying. So the bottom line is very simple. Senator McConnell, cutting Medicare benefits will not make us stronger. Firing teachers will not make us stronger. Rolling back investments in innovation and research and high-tech jobs of the future won't make us stronger. But ending wasteful tax subsidies that do nothing but contribute to the deficit for oil companies and corporate jet owners will make us stronger. Meet us part of the way here. Don't say my way or no way, because that is too risky. And that is telling the world that we will not fulfill our obligations the way every family in America has to fill theirs. I yield the floor and note the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka.
rise today with great concern.
The Senate is in a quorum call.
I ask for the dispensation of the quorum call and to proceed in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you. Madam President, today I rise with great concern concerning a program that was just revealed in the Sunday New York Times. Outstanding work by Robert Pear called U.S. Plan Stealth Survey on Access to Doctors. I'm asking my colleagues to join in a letter to Secretary Sebelius sharing concern with the legality, standards, and repercussions of this program. I have deep concerns regarding the Department's recent plans for this so-called stealth survey, its legality, the notification to Congress, the lack of standards for any misconduct or bad reporting by the staff hired to carry out this work, in looking at clandestinely at American doctors and their practice of medicine. The cost and proposed clandestine method of collecting information on physician offices is questionable, and therefore I'm going to be requesting details on how this survey will be conducted, how investigators will be punished for any misconduct or extortion that they may carry out in their duties, and how patient and physician confidentiality will be maintained. In our letter, we're outlining 12 key questions. First, since there are already a number of surveys answering this question, does this expenditure of taxpayer money add anything? We're asking for the Department to provide detailed records of their literature review on the current research that has already been published on the subject before launching this taxpayer expense. We're also asking for the total cost of this program to be revealed. Second, we're asking for records on how the National Opinion Research Center of Chicago, Illinois, won a federally competitive bid to carry out this work. Number three, in concluding the results of this survey, how will the NORC decide what qualifies as an acceptable response or best practice from physicians that they have targeted? Number four, how will patient and doctor confidentiality be maintained? If researchers report bad information or use the survey for extortion, bribery, or other acts, how will they be disciplined? Number five, once concluded, who has access to this information? The Department, the White House, the Congress, the press? Number six, by what criteria will individual physicians be targeted for participation? Will age, average incomes surrounding office locations, or political affiliation be excluded from factors considered when targeting physicians? Number seven, will federal employees carry out this work, or will it be conducted by a contracted call center for data collection? And who is qualified to conduct this survey, and how will they be chosen? Number eight, if the staff improperly releases patient or physician data, how will they be disciplined? Number nine, I'd like their description of the FY11 Appropriations Committee program or account number on which this was funded. Number 10, I also want to describe the statutory authorization used to carry out this work and provide the congressional notifications informing the committees of jurisdiction of their intent to obligate funds for this purpose. Number 11, also asking for specific sections identified in the President's budget under which the funding for this work was requested. And number 12, if a physician wishes to correct data collected by the NORC, what legal redress does he or she have? Now, there have been a number of very reliable studies which confirm that many patients on Medicaid and Medicare cannot find a doctor to see them. Previous studies also confirmed that we do not have enough doctors, particularly primary care doctors. And we all know that government programs often provide poor service and suffer from funding failures or corruption. In this time of serious fiscal constraints, I would urge us to focus our limited federal resources on ways that we would actually address these problems, rather than launching another taxpayer-funded spending program to clandestinely review the work of our physicians. And, Madam President, with that, I yield back and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Quorum call be dispensed with,
Without objection.
and that I be allowed to speak in morning business for up to 7 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to bring to my colleagues' attention a very well-written but disturbing op-ed in today's Wall Street Journal by one of our country's foremost economists, a person whose calculations and prognostications we should not lightly lay aside, Larry Lindsay. In this piece entitled "The Deficit is Worse Than We Think," he posits 3 reasons why we really need to get serious about deficit reduction. And I'll just mention the 3 reasons, put this in the record, and make a comment or 2 about it. First, he says that if interest rates in this country go back to their historic levels, we would have annual interest expenses on our debt roughly $420 billion higher in 2014 and $700 billion higher in 2020. And the 10-year rise in interest rates would be about $4.9 trillion higher than under the current cost of borrowing. That would obviously wipe out any savings and then some that we are trying to achieve right now in our deficit reduction discussions. The second problem is that the official forecasts for growth are probably far too rosy considering the current circumstances. If we were to grow at a rate that he believes is much more realistic than those projected by the President's budget, we will miss his budget number by a cumulative 5.2 percentage points and incur an additional debt of $4 trillion, which is the equivalent to all of the 10-year savings in the budget that passed the House of Representatives. And third, the cost estimates for what we call Obamacare are going to be well off the mark, unfortunately, on the low end. That the prognostications by people who have surveyed the businesses who will either keep their insurance or turn that cost over to the government will result in an extra bill for the taxpayers of roughly $74 billion in 2014, rising to $85 billion in 2019 because of the subsidies that the government will have to pay under that. His conclusion is that only serious long-term spending reduction in the entitlement area can begin to address the nation's deficit and debt problems because that's where the bulk of the money that we spend goes. I think he is absolutely correct, but if he is correct about these projections, then we're not even close to achieving the savings that we need to in order to avoid a cataclysmic future for our country. Also today, I noted in another piece in an Associated Press article that the growth rate for the first quarter of this year was 1.9%. They're forecasting that for the next quarter it'll be 2.3%. That's way lower than any of us would like, and it's too anemic to even keep up with our population in terms of job growth. This article notes, and I quote, "The economy has to grow 3% a year just to hold the unemployment rate steady and keep up with population growth. And it has to average about 5% growth for a year to lower the unemployment rate by a full percentage point. It's 9.1% today. So you can see that we're growing at less than half the rate needed to begin to make a dent in unemployment. This bodes very, very badly for our future." And finally, in a National Review Online piece today by Andrew Stiles, there is this reference to a Harvard economist, Alberto Alesina, and I'll just quote from the article. Alberto Alesina, a Harvard economist, who's analyzed the ways in which various countries responded to large fiscal crises, concludes that spending cuts are much more effective than tax increases in stabilizing the debt without harming the economy. Quote, "In fact, in several episodes, spending cuts adopted to reduce deficits have been associated with economic expansions rather than recessions," Alesina writes. These findings were echoed in a report from Goldman Sachs analysts Ben Broadbent and Kevin Day, which examined every major fiscal correction in the OECD since 1975. The point of all of these things is that the projections about economic growth, about increases in interest rates, and expenditures by the federal government all point to the need for us to reduce our expenses at the federal government level, and that spending cuts are a much more effective way to stabilize the debt and not hurt the economy than tax increases. And I say all of this because, as everyone by now knows, the negotiations that were being conducted under the auspices of Vice President Biden have broken down over the issue of whether or not tax cuts have to be a part of the resolution of the issue. The point that we've been making is that tax increases in times like this, when we're trying to come out of a recession and we need economic growth, would be the wrong medicine for this ailing economy. That the better way to do it is by spending reductions. And it's obvious from Larry Lindsay's piece that the spending reductions that we've been talking about, far from being draconian, are actually not nearly enough in order to achieve the result that we have to avoid the kind of interest rate increases and increased costs at the federal government level that he predicts. So, Madam President, I hope my colleagues will think again the sort of ideological commitment they have to raising taxes in the context of today's issue. That shouldn't be part of our discussion. That will only hurt the economy, inhibit job creation and economic growth, and delay the day when we begin to recover from this economic downturn. Instead, we need to focus on the kind of spending reductions that were embodied in the budget that the House of Representatives passed, and that those of us on this side of the aisle have been trying to put forward as a condition for increasing the debt ceiling. Madam President, I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Senator from
May
Arizona.
I just ask first unanimous consent to insert in the record the Wall Street Journal op-ed by Lawrence Lindsay.
Without objection.
Thank you. Madam President, I suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Without objection.